Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be talking about a normal problem that people have when they're in an opening like the Joko piano. After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. We're going to have bishop c5 starting the Joko piano, d3, d6, and here's kind of going to be our starting position. So the problem that people have kind of arises when white plays a move like bishop e3. We have now this tension between this bishop on c5 and the bishop on e3. And of course, the big question is, how do we handle this tension? What is the right decision here? So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So now the interesting thing in here is pretty much the only bad decision you can make if you're playing the black pieces is to leave the bishop on c5. The only thing that we're fairly sure of in this position is that if you allow the move bishop takes c5, dc5, having your pawn structure split in such a way without having something to compensate for it like a bishop pair is probably a bad thing. So either retreating to b6 or taking on e3 should probably be good. Now, my chess upbringing, I kind of favored retreating the bishop to b6, and I always did this kind of as an ironclad rule. And one of the reasons that this is actually such a good rule to retreat this bishop is, of course, one of the things that white is trying to do when he plays bishop e3 is he's hoping that you're going to take when he can take back and open up his f-file. This actually makes it quite a bit easier for him to develop his rooks. It actually completely solves the problem of white's development. But, of course, in exchange for that, white will have some doubled pawns, and that should actually compensate. It should level off. I wish I could tell you that one of those things was more important than the other, that the open rook file was more important than the doubled pawns. But in this case, it should actually level off, and it should be something relatively equivalent. White has easy development, but black has slightly nicer pawns. But after bishop b6, one of the nice things about the position is now taking on b6 for white is actually just kind of a bad idea, because this is not an equivalent exchange for white. After bishop b6, we're going to play a b6 with black, and what we've done is we've opened up the rook file. So again, we've solved the problem of our development of the rook. We've opened the rook file, and we've doubled our pawns. So you'd think this would be similar to what black would have done here, where he doubles the pawns on e3, but he opens the rook file. But it's not. And the reason it's not is actually kind of interesting. When the a pawn moves from a7 to b6, we're actually improving the position of the pawn. The pawn on a7 only controls one square, but the pawn on b6 controls two. And because of this, the slight weakness that we have, because now our pawns are doubled, is not fully compensated for. Basically what I'm saying is now the open rook file is more important. We can place a value on that open rook file and say it is way more important that black will be able to at least develop one of his rooks to an open file. This rook on a8 is already developed. It is more important that black has an open file than black has doubled pawns, because his pawns actually improved when they went from a7 to b6. And this is kind of a weird improvement, because the pawn itself improves. The a pawn improves and turns into a b pawn. But the pawn structure's a little bit weaker, because now you don't have a pawn that can move from a7 to a6 and kick something on b5 if we decide to plant a whole bunch of pieces there. So it's kind of a weird situation, but basically this is a favorable exchange for black. So going back, like, how do we handle it if they take on e3? Or like if you want to play this with white and somebody takes on e3, or if you want to play this as black and you want to take on e3, like what's the best way to do this, and kind of what's the evaluation of this? Well, there's a couple things that you kind of want to keep in mind, and just kind of positional ideas. And I'm going to show you another game. I'm going to show you another opening completely to talk about this pawn structure, where we would have something like, say, knight c3, and then say knight f6, bishop e3, and then let's say bishop e3, fe3. So we're going to have this pawn structure. But before I go into talking about this pawn structure completely, and I'm going to show you a couple examples of this pawn structure, I'm going to show you another game. Actually, another game that came from a completely different opening. It actually came from a Ruy Lopez. It was played in the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Vishy Anand. And Anand had the white pieces and Carlsen had black. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. And I'm kind of going to blitz through this game a little bit, because the opening itself just isn't terribly relevant. What is relevant is when we get that pawn structure, which happens kind of way down the road here. So you see, Anand improved his pawns from the A file to the B file, and then we have all this stuff happens, and then eventually some exchanges happen, and then we have an exchange and we have FE. So look at this pawn structure. This is the critical pawn structure that we're kind of talking about here. We have doubled pawns on the E file. In exchange for that, white has managed to get an open F file, and that should give him easy development for his rooks. Watch what Carlsen does. So Carlsen just plays chess. He's got the cleaner pawn structure. He's pushing some pawns in the middle of the board. He's trying to get Anand to commit his pawns to here, and basically he's going to just really protect the E5 square and just kind of create sort of a blockade against these doubled E pawns. But he's not going to exchange when white can take back with a pawn. He doesn't want that to happen. And he's very careful not to do that. He times his exchanging very well. He plays takes, queen b7, hitting the pawn on e4. And then after rook d1, he plays queen c6. After queen f5, now he finally plays e takes d4. When taking back with a pawn is not possible, white has to take back with a rook. And because of that, black actually gets to start taking advantage of these weakened doubled e pawns. And it turned out to be more of an advantage that white had weakened doubled e pawns than it was an advantage that white had an open f file. And so that was kind of how Carlsen took advantage of the doubled pawns on the e file. But of course, this can very easily go the other way. Like if we go all the way back to just the main position that we're talking about, which bishop c4, bishop c5, d3, d6, and then let's say knight c3, knight f6, and then let's say bishop e3, we're going to have this very famous game. We're going to have bishop e3, fe3, and we're actually following Emanuel Lasker versus William Steinitz, played in 1896, so going in the way back machine here. And that game continued knight a5, bishop b3, knight b3, ab3. So Emanuel Lasker, playing the white pieces, has managed to get a bunch of open files for his pieces. He's gotten the open rook file and the other open rook file, and William Steinitz has got the cleaner pawn structure. And actually, Steinitz did very well here. Don't let the result of this game fool you. Steinitz was actually doing quite all right with the black pieces. He was maybe a little bit too straightforward, but it turned out to be okay. He played knight g4, and then he played f6. So his idea is very similar to Carlsen's. He's fortifying his e5 square, so in the face of the d4 push, he's just going to kind of hang on to that e5 pawn, and as long as he hangs on to that point, he can sort of try to take advantage of these doubled e pawns later. So after d4, this is the whole plan, is he's just going to kind of super fortify that square, and then he brings his knight back to f7, and at this point, Steinitz still has a very slight edge. But everything kind of went downhill here. After rook on d to g1, Steinitz actually castled queenside. And this actually allowed Lasker to start conducting a queenside attack, and he began with b4, b5 is an idea, d5 is an idea, breaking up the position around the black king. Lasker ended up with an advantage, and Lasker actually ended up winning this game. So I would say on the scholastic level, I would say having the open files and having the easier plan of development usually favors scholastic players and usually favors amateur players. So I would much rather be on the side with the doubled e pawns and the easy central control, just because you're going to have that easy open rook file. You're not going to have to rack your brain trying to figure out how to finish up your development, and you've really got that going for you. But again, you've got this excellent option. You know, when they do play bishop e3, you can always just retreat. You can play bishop b6. This was another move that was also favored by Carlsen. Carlsen liked to play the move bishop b6 here as well in this position. So we see positions where Carlsen is taking advantage of the double lead pawns. But we also see positions where Carlsen is avoiding it and playing bishop b6 because bishop b6 is a perfectly reasonable move. There's this game between Nigel Short and Magnus Carlsen, played in London in 2011, where they both kind of avoided doing this. It was bishop b3, bishop e6, and neither one of them wanted to take on b6. Neither one of them wanted to take on e6. They just maintained the tension for quite a while. And after h3, h6, after h3, rook e8, finally, Nigel Short took on b6. Carlsen played a captures b6. We had knight e2, h6, knight g3, d5, c3, and the position is just relatively level, and they just continued to play chess from here, and this game just ended in a draw. So that's kind of how these things work out. If you want to, you can play bishop b6. There's pretty much no risk here. If they take, they're actually improving your pawn structure. It actually helps out black's game more than it hurts black. And you also have the option of just taking on e3, doubling the pawns, but keeping in mind that these positions are actually kind of difficult to play, but they should be okay for black. The doubled pawns that white has are compensated for by the fact that white has an open rook file and an easy development, and those things should level out. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.